The Phase, a practical guidebook for lucid dreaming and out-of-body travel. Version 2.0, October 2011, by Michael Raduga. The phenomenon. Way back when, people did not have consciousness. Yet once it developed, it gradually started occupying more and more of the waking state. However, nowadays consciousness is outgrowing the waking state and has begun continuing its expansion into other states. Consciousness increasingly springs up during REM phase sleep, giving rise to the most astounding phenomenon of human existence, feeling oneself in an out-of-body experience. It is probable that men and women of the future will have a conscious existence in two worlds. For now, however, this can only be accomplished using the special techniques described in this book. Hints at the occurrence of this phenomenon may be found in the Bible and other ancient texts. It lies at the foundation of other phenomena such as near-death experiences, alien abductions, sleep paralysis, and so on. The phenomenon is so extraordinary that many occult movements consider experiencing it to be an accomplishment of the highest order. Statistical research has shown that 1 person in 2 will have an intense encounter with it. Meanwhile, the existence of the phenomenon itself has been scientific fact since the 1970s. The phenomenon is well represented in many different kinds of modern practices, albeit under various names ranging from astral projection and out-of-body experience to lucid dreaming. We shall use the pragmatic term the phase or phase state to refer to all the above phenomena, as there is no difference at all between them in their usual practice. We will also take as materialist an approach as possible, casting aside all theoretical tripe and concerning ourselves only with what works in practice. As regards sensory perception of the phenomenon itself, this is not a mere visualization exercise. Reality itself is but a dull daydream in comparison to the phase state. You won't feel your physical body on the bed there, and all of your senses will be fully immersed in a new world of perception. You can touch and behold anything, walk and fly, eat and drink, feel pain and pleasure, and much, much more. And all this with even more realism and lucidness of perception than daily life. This is the reason many novices experience shock or even mortal fear upon entering this state. It's a true parallel world in terms of perception. The practical side of the phenomenon holds even greater opportunity. In the phase, you can travel the earth, the universe, and time itself. You can meet any person you want, friends and family, the deceased, and celebrities. You can obtain information from the phase and apply it towards improving your daily life. You can influence your physiology and treat a number of ailments. You can realize your secret desires and develop your creativity. Meanwhile, people with physical impairments can release themselves from all fetters and obtain anything lacking for them in the physical world. And all this is just the tip of the iceberg of ways to apply the phenomenon in daily life. You may think that it's difficult to learn if you've read elsewhere that you need spend months, if not years, on it. Get those old wives' tales out of your head. We're in the 21st century. The instructions laid out in this section will help most people to experience this amazing state within only 2 to 3 days of trying. Remember, the techniques described in this book are the result of many years of experimental research at the OBE Research Center. Thousands have participated firsthand in developing and perfecting the techniques presented here and have proven that they can be used by absolutely everyone. All that you need to do is follow these simple instructions as exactly and carefully as you can. Then, you'll be able to literally live in 2 worlds. There are 3 primary methods for leaving the body. They are used at different times of the day, after sleeping, while sleeping, and without sleeping beforehand. We will begin getting experience using the techniques by starting from the easiest ones, the indirect techniques, which are performed immediately upon awakening. They are quite simple. After mastering those techniques, you can then try to leave your body in the evening or during the day without sleeping beforehand. The indirect method, step-by-step instructions. So, you have decided to experience out-of-body sensations and want to achieve this as quickly as possible. To that end, here we present a brief description of the easiest method, cycles of indirect techniques. This is a universal and most effective way to obtain a phase experience. It has been refined by the OOB Research Center's work with thousands of people all over the world. The secret to indirect techniques is to perform them upon awakening when the human brain is physiologically quite close to the phase state, or still in it. Interesting fact, indirect techniques are mainly to thank for our 80% success rate over only 2 days of attempts at 3-day seminars, even in groups of 50 people and more. Once, more than half of the group had a phase experience by the second day, and most had 2 or more experiences. Cycles of indirect techniques consist of attempts to separate immediately upon awakening, and if that is unsuccessful, then quickly cycling through techniques over the course of a minute until one of them works, after which it is possible to separate from the body. Usually, 1 to 5 properly performed attempts are all that is necessary to obtain results. The techniques described below work extremely well both when awakening from a daytime nap as well as in the middle of the night. However, we will be concentrating on the optimum strategy, the deferred method, which allows for numerous attempts to be had in a single day. This substantially increases the probability of success occurring in only 1 to 3 days. Step 1. Sleep 6 hours and then wake up with an alarm clock. On a night before a free day when you won't have to wake up early, go to bed at your usual time and set your alarm so that you'll only sleep for about 6 hours. When the alarm goes off, you must get up to drink a glass of water, go to the bathroom, and read these instructions once again. Do not attempt any techniques before going to bed the night before, no matter what the case. You just need to lie down and get some sound sleep. The sounder you sleep over these 6 hours, the better your chances of getting results. Step 2. Go back to sleep with an intention. After 3 to 50 minutes of being awake, go back to bed and concentrate your attention on how you will perform cycles of indirect techniques upon each subsequent awakening in order to leave your body and implement your prepared plan of action. No need to set the alarm clock this time. Each subsequent awakening should occur naturally. If it's too bright in the room, you can wear a special eye mask. If it's loud, use earplugs. Meanwhile, focus your attention on how you're going to try to wake up without moving your physical body. This isn't mandatory, but it will substantially increase the effectiveness of the indirect techniques. Now sleep for 2 to 4 hours, but take advantage of natural awakenings that occur during this period of time. They will happen much more often than usual. After each attempt, whether successful or not, you must fall back asleep with that very same intention of waking up and trying again. In this way, you can make many attempts over the course of a single morning. Up to a quarter of those attempts will be successful, even for novices. 70 to 95% of them will be successful for experienced practitioners. Step 3. Separate the instant you awaken. Each time you wake up again, try not to move or open your eyes. Instead, immediately try to separate from your body. Up to 50% of success with indirect techniques comes during this simple first step, one that is so simple that people don't even suspect that it could work. In order to separate from your body, simply try to stand up, roll out, or levitate. Try to do it with your own perceived, i.e. subtle body, but without moving your physical muscles. Remember that it will feel just like normal physical movement. When the moment comes, don't think too hard about how to do it. During those first moments after awakening, stubbornly try to separate from your body any way that you can, and no matter what, most likely you'll intuitively know how to do it. The most important thing is not to think too hard and not to lose those first seconds of awakening. Interesting fact, during the second lesson at School of Out-of-Body Travel seminars, participants are asked to explain in their own words how they were able to separate, but without using the words easily, simply, or as usual. They are usually always unable to comply with this request, as separation nearly always occurs for them easily, simply, and as usual when the moment is right. Step 4. Cycling techniques after attempts to separate. If immediate separation doesn't work out, which would become apparent after 3 to 5 seconds, start right then and there to alternate between 2 to 3 of the techniques that are most straightforward to you, until one of them works. When this happens, you can try to separate again. Choose 2 to 3 of the following 5 techniques so that you can alternate through them during awakenings. Rotation. For 3 to 5 seconds, try to imagine rotating to either side along your head-to-toe axis as vividly as possible. If no sensations arise, switch to another technique. If a real or even slight sensation of rotation arises, Focus your attention on this technique and rotate even more energetically. As soon as the sensation of rotating becomes stable and real, you should try to separate again using it as a starting point. Swimmer technique. For 3 to 5 seconds, try to imagine as decidedly as possible that you are swimming or simply making swimming motions with your arms. Try to feel it no matter what and as vividly as you can. If nothing happens, switch to another technique. There is no need to switch techniques if the sensation of swimming arises. Instead, intensify the sensations that arise. Afterwards, the real sensation of swimming in water will come to you. That's already the phase, and there's no need for separation when you're already in the phase. However, if such sensations occur while you're in bed instead of a body of water, then you will need to employ a separation technique. Use the swimming sensations as a starting point. Observing images. Peer into the void before your closed eyes for 3 to 5 seconds. If nothing occurs, switch to another technique. If you see any kind of imagery, peer into it until it becomes realistic. Once it is, separate from the body right then and there, or allow yourself to be pulled into the imagery. When peering at imagery, it's important not to scrutinize details, lest the image wash away. You'll need to look through the picture, which will make it more realistic. Hand visualization. For 3 to 5 seconds, imagine vividly and decidedly that you are rubbing your hands together close to your eyes. Try no matter what to feel them in front of you, to see them, and even to hear the sound of them rubbing. If nothing happens, switch to another technique. If any of the above sensations start to arise, then keep with the technique and intensify it until it becomes totally realistic. Afterwards, you can try to separate from the body, using the sensations arising from the technique as a start-off point. Phantom wiggling. Try to wiggle your perceived hands or feet for 3 to 5 seconds. Do not move a muscle under any circumstances, and do not imagine the movement itself. For example, try to intensively press down and then up, wiggle to the left and right, and so on. If nothing occurs, switch to another technique. If a slight or sluggish sensation of real movement suddenly arises, then focus your attention on the technique, trying to increase the range of motion as much as you can. Once you can move by at least 4 inches, immediately try to separate from your body, starting off from the sensations arising from the technique. All that you need to do for each attempt is alternate between 2 to 3 techniques for 3 to 5 seconds each. This leads to indirect techniques cycles, where the practitioner alternates one technique after another over the course of a minute in search of the one that works. It is very important to do no less than 4 cycles of 2 to 3 techniques during an attempt. Remember, even if a technique doesn't work immediately, that doesn't mean that it will not work on the very next cycle of techniques, if not just a bit later. That's precisely why it's necessary to stubbornly alternate techniques, performing no less than 4 complete cycles, but all within no longer than a minute. For example, the entire process may take place as follows. A phaser goes to bed at 11:30 p.m. and sets his alarm for 6 a.m. At 6, he wakes up to his alarm clock, goes to the bathroom, drinks some water, and recalls the indirect techniques as well as his interesting plan of action for the phase. For example, to look in the back mirror and fly to Mars. At 6:05 a.m., the phaser goes back to sleep with the clear intention of entering the phase upon each subsequent awakening. At 7:35 a.m., or whenever natural awakening occurs, the phaser awakes unexpectedly and immediately tries to separate from his body then and there. Not having separated within 3 to 5 seconds, the phaser begins to try to do rotations, but those also do not work within 3 to 5 seconds. The phaser performs the swimmer technique, but that does not work within 3 to 5 seconds. The phaser does phantom wiggling, but it doesn't work within 3 to 5 seconds. The phaser does rotation again, then the swimmer technique and phantom wiggling for 3 to 5 seconds each. Then he once again does rotation, swimming, and phantom wiggling for 3 to 5 seconds each. On the 4th cycle, he begins to do rotation, and it unexpectedly starts working. The feeling of rotation arises. The phaser keeps with this technique and spins as hard as he can and separates from his body right then and there using the sensation of rotation. He then runs to the mirror, all the while actively palpating and scrutinizing everything around him from a close distance, which intensifies his sensations. Having already looked in the mirror, the practitioner employs the translocation technique and finds himself on Mars, but he is unexpectedly returned to the body. The phaser then immediately tries to leave his body again, but is unable to. He falls back asleep with the clear intention of repeating the attempt upon the next awakening and staying longer on Mars, and so on. Just repeat the above using the techniques that come most naturally to you, and you'll open yourself up to a whole new universe. If you take 20 to 30 minutes out of your day to simply train the techniques and the procedure, the method will be remembered and work better. This will substantially increase the success of attempts upon awakening. Dream consciousness is also considered to be a phase experience. If you suddenly realize that you're dreaming while asleep, then that's already the phase. You should therefore proceed to implement your plan of action and stabilize the state. If dream consciousness does arise, it would be a side effect of doing technique cycles upon awakenings. This side effect is quite common. Always be ready for it. Step 5. After the attempt, fall back asleep if you can after each attempt, whether successful or not, in order to make another attempt to leave your body upon your next awakening. That way you'll not only be able to leave your body in one day, but also to do it several times on the very first day. Interesting fact, at a school of out-of-body travel seminar, a novice was able to leave his body for the first time in his life in 6 of 8 attempts upon awakening the very first morning. Even the most unsuccessful attempt should last no longer than a minute. If nothing happens over that period of time, it's much more effective to fall asleep and catch the next awakening, as opposed to stubbornly trying to squeeze results out of the current attempt. Plan of action in the phase. Before entering the phase, you should clearly outline what you are going to do there immediately after separation. This will increase both the quality of the experience and the likelihood of it occurring. Below is a list of the most interesting, if not the most straightforward, phase activities for novices. Choose no more than 2 to 3 activities and remember them well. Look in a mirror, a must for the first phase. Eat or drink something you like. Visit any tourist attraction. Fly over the earth. Fly throughout the universe. Fly to neighbors, friends, and family. Meet a lover, meet a deceased relative, meet any celebrity, take medicine for treatment, obtain information from phase objects, travel to the past or the future, walk through a wall, transmutate into an animal, drive a sports car, ride a motorcycle, breathe underwater, put your hand inside your body, feel vibrations, inhabit 2 bodies at once, inhabit another person's body, move and set fire to objects just by looking at them, drink liquor, make love and reach orgasm for your first phase. Be sure to set yourself the goal of making it to a mirror and looking at your reflection. You should specifically program yourself to do this activity, as it will substantially facilitate your first steps in conquering the phase. You may then complete other items on your plan of action and never return to the mirror again. If your sensations in the phase are dull, i.e. poor sight or numbed bodily sensations, try to touch everything around you actively and scrutinize the minute details of objects from up close. This will allow you to have a more realistic experience. The same activities should be performed in order to maintain the phase when the first symptoms of a return to the body occur. For example, when everything becomes dim, returning to the body is something you needn't worry about. The state will not last more than several minutes in any case, especially for novices who are little acquainted with techniques for maintaining the phase. Didn't work? Set yourself this goal. Make 5 to 10 attempts to leave your body upon awakening. This procedure, when followed correctly, is sufficient for 50 to 80% of novices to get their first results. Turn back to this section if you run into a problem, as it describes the mistakes encountered in 99% of unsuccessful attempts. Never try these techniques every day, otherwise the success rate of your attempts will drop drastically. Spend no more than 2 to 3 days of the week on it, preferably only on days off. If you don't have an opportunity to sleep in long and with interruption, then don't forget that cycles of indirect techniques can also be used after any other awakening, in the middle of the night, for example, or better yet, during a midday nap. What's most important is to establish the clear intention of trying them before falling asleep. Despite the simplicity of these techniques, novices stubbornly deviate from the clear instructions, following them in their own way or only halfway. Remember what's most important beforehand. The more carefully and literally you follow the instructions in this book, the better your chances for success. 90% will obtain results within 1 to 3 awakenings if they do everything correctly from the beginning. Interesting fact, at School of Out-of-Body Travel seminars, the main task consists not in explaining the proper procedure, but merely in getting participants to follow it to the letter. Even if that goal is only halfway accomplished, success is inevitable. Typical mistakes when performing indirect techniques include lack of an attempt to separate, forgetting to simply try to separate immediately after awakening before cycling techniques, even though this may lead to up to 50% of all experiences. Exception, awakening to movement, after which one may immediately proceed to the techniques. Lack of aggression, a desire to get a technique to work no matter what, and really get into it, is the main criterion for success in employing the indirect technique procedure. Meanwhile, determination should not be superficial, but intensely focused on the actions to be completed. Lack of determination can also manifest itself in passively falling asleep during an attempt. Fewer than 4 cycles. No matter what happens and no matter what thoughts occur, you should perform no less than 4 cycles of techniques, assuming none have worked so far. Not following this simple rule will scuttle more than half of your opportunities to enter the phase. Unnecessary change of technique. Despite the clear instructions given, novices will stubbornly switch techniques after 3 to 5 seconds, even when a technique has started working in one way or another. This is a serious error. If a technique has started working, however so slightly, you need to keep with it and try to intensify it in any way possible. Unnecessary continuation of a technique. If a technique hasn't begun working in the least after 3 to 5 seconds, it should be changed for another. The point of cycling is to quickly alternate between techniques until one of them starts working. Forgetting to separate. When any technique starts working upon awakening, no matter to what degree, the practitioner is nearly always already in the phase and is simply lying on his body while in it. That's why you should always try to separate immediately upon there being stable signs that a technique is working. If that doesn't work out, then you need to return to intensifying the technique and try to separate again. If you don't use the first seconds of a technique working, then the phase usually ends quite quickly and the necessary state goes away. Don't lie in your body while in the phase. Excessive analysis. If you analyze what's going on when cycling through techniques upon awakening, then you are not concentrated on the techniques themselves and are sidetracking yourself. This will cause you to miss nearly all chances of obtaining results. The desire to experience the technique working should fully consume you, leaving no place in the mind for analysis or contemplation. Excessively alert awakening, no attempt or a sluggish one, due to the perception of an excessively alert awakening, which will not actually be alert, but only seem to be from 70 to 90% of the time. The practitioner will either forego trying anything or will make attempts quite unassuredly, which is equivalent to not trying at all. You ought to follow the instructions automatically and not pay attention to such perceptions upon awakening. Attempting for longer than a minute. If no result is obtained after 1 minute of cycling, then your odds of success will be much greater if you go back to sleep right away and catch the next awakening in order to make a new attempt, as opposed to stubbornly trying to continue on with the techniques. Incomplete separation. When attempting to separate, sometimes it doesn't come easily or completely. Sluggishness, stuck body parts, and being stuck in 2 bodies at once are some things that may occur. Never give up under any circumstances and do not stop separating if this happens. Full separation will occur if you counteract such problems with all your strength. Not recognizing the phase practitioners often enter the phase, but then return back to the body, because they feel that what occurred is not what they had expected. For example, when observing images, they are often pulled into the scenery, or they are spontaneously thrown into another world when rotating. Practitioners often think that they have to experience the feeling of separation itself, which is why they might return back to their bodies in order to obtain it. The same applies to becoming conscious while dreaming, as the practitioner is already in the phase, and it only remains to deepen and implement his plan of action. Awakening to movement, no attempt or a sluggish one. Awakening without moving is desirable, but not mandatory. There's no sense in forgoing most opportunities by waiting for the right awakening. You must take advantage of every awakening that you can. Wasting the first seconds. Try to develop the habit of immediately and reflexively proceeding to the techniques upon awakening without losing a second. The more time that elapses between awakening and the attempt itself, the lower the odds of success. It's best to learn to catch not so much the very second of awakening, but rather the transitional moment when surfacing from sleep. Separation is almost always successful during that transitional moment. Selection of same-type techniques. There's no point in selecting techniques for your practice that are similar to one another or focused on the same sensation when using techniques from other parts of this book. Use of a single technique, cycling indirect techniques upon awakening, is a universal method that can work for anybody, provided they alternate several techniques. Completely different methods may work over different attempts. That's why using only a single technique upon awakening, instead of cycling through at least 2 leads, to substantially lowered odds of entering the phase. False physical movement. Sometimes separation is so indistinguishable from ordinary physical movement that novices are unable to believe their own success. They perceive separation as a physical movement and then disappointedly lie back down into their body. In such cases, one ought to carefully evaluate the situation and possibly perform reality checks. The 4 principles of success. Do it no matter what. When performing phase entrance and separation techniques, put your all into them and concentrate on them as if they were your life's goal and mission. Chomp at the bit to leave your body. Be aggressive. Put all of your enthusiasm and desire into the techniques. The desire to get the techniques to work should be coupled with full aggression in achieving that result. Be self-assured. During attempts, be as sure as possible of the results. When making attempts, lack of assuredness in yourself, and the results will substantially lower your probability of phase entrance. Nearly all phase entrances are accompanied by self-assured thought like, I'm going to do it now, while unsuccessful attempts involve thinking, I guess I'll try, but I doubt it'll work. Do it robotically. Don't think about anything when completing the technique procedure. You already have the instructions. Just carry them out. Not matter what things may seem to you or what thoughts enter your mind. Robotically is also understood to mean exactly. The indirect technique procedure has been honed by work with thousands of practitioners all over the world. Neglecting any detail isn't worth it. It worked. If you were successfully able to employ the indirect techniques and enter the phase at least 3 to 5 times, then you can gradually move on to the advanced textbook in order to flesh out your practice. Now you're a man or woman of the future, and all that remains is to hone your new ability.